Welcome to the second in our series of Advocacy in the Maine Legislature, how-to series for new and experienced activists. So lots of us have been doing this a long time. Other folks are really new to it. But either way, we're looking at trying to help build some skills and some comfort and some confidence. Here's the whole series. So some of you already said you were at last week's How Does a Bill Become a Law? Tonight, effective ways to contact your legislator. We're really just going to be talking about how, not so much like, should I call or email, although I'm sure that will come up, as how to frame a conversation, how to approach it, how to make sure that you're being effective in getting your point across. Next week, we'll talk about tracking the issues that you care about, which is something that it can be pretty fascinating and honestly is something that's good to know how to do before you contact your legislator. Then we'll look at some historical context on session 4, and session 5, Advocacy 201, will be for all of our sort of advocate graduates who absolutely know how to do this stuff and want to talk about, okay, what's next? You know, I've taken the sort of basic advocacy steps and I want to get more involved. You can sign up for all of those on our website, the same way you signed up for this one. So I want to start us off with some introductions. There are actually 4 of us here today, so I'm the MC, but I've got a few people helping me present this subject, and it'll be pretty informal. But I put us in alphabetical order because it seemed to make sense to me. So I'm Evan Tess-Murray. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns, and I am the Education and Engagement Projects Manager for Democracy Maine, the League of Women Voters, MCCE, which means that I oversee all of our education and outreach projects, like our voter guides and voter registration type stuff. I pair up with our advocacy agenda, mostly around grassroots education and civic education stuff. And I do a lot of our workshops and things. I would love to invite the rest of you to introduce yourselves. Whitney, do you want to take us away?
Oh boy.
Sure. So happy to be in your space, and thank you for having me. My name is Whitney Parrish. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. And I'm the Advocacy and Communications Director for Health Equity Alliance. And we are a direct service and advocacy providing organization based in Bangor and Down East Spain. So we have lots of locations. We're formerly the Down East AIDS Network. So I'm our lobbyist. So that's one of the things I do. And I am the former policy and programs director for the Maine Women's Lobby as well. So I've been doing a lot of different issue areas for a while, and super happy to be with you all and journey and learn with you. So Representative Pluker, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Bill Pluker. I use he, him pronouns. And I represent Hope, Warren, Appleton, and East Union. And I am on the Criminal Justice Committee, as well as this is my 2nd term on the Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry Committee. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Representative Warren, did you make it? I heard you had a power outage.
I did, but I did make it, and hopefully I will continue to be here. So yeah, my name is Sophie or Sophia Warren, whichever one's good for you. My pronouns she, hers, they, them, and I represent my hometown, my home district of Coastal Scarborough. So I really appreciate being here and learning with you, because I'm new to this as well.
Well, I love the mix of different sort of skill sets and backgrounds we have in this room right now. Is I think going to be pretty cool. I'm going to, here's just a rough overview for tonight's workshop. We're going to talk about the planning that you need to do before you want to have a conversation with your legislator, talk about framing the conversation, go through some tips from our legislators and our lobbyists who are here, who really have done a lot more of this, or who know what they would like to hear, how they'd like to be approached. Then we're going to break into groups. You're going to create a practice plan with real issues. I've chosen some that I think people will enjoy that are not necessarily the things we're organizing around, but that are a chance to practice figuring out how to approach somebody, how to frame an issue, what you want to say in order to get a little bit of practice doing that in groups, and then come back, give it a try, get some feedback and ask some questions. The real goal tonight is that if you have never contacted your legislator, then at the end of this, hopefully you'll feel a little more comfortable knowing how and feel like you can. If you've done it before, then this will hopefully step you through a process that you've maybe done without having thought about it very hard. Either way, we hear all the time from folks that they want to hear from their constituents, and we know how powerful citizen voices are. So we want people to feel like, yeah, I can call my senator or my representative. And I'm saying call, email is also a thing we're all doing a lot right now. COVID means we're not going out for coffee. So that end of things is a little harder. We aren't hanging out outside people's committee meetings because everything's virtual. So it does look a little different than it does not during a pandemic. But the piece where we're still wanting to talk and create those human connections and build relationships is still exactly the same. So the planning process. Honestly, if you just want to call someone and say, hey, I really care about a thing, you can do that. But if you want to be effective, you're going to want to plan out what you're going to say in advance and make sure that you are communicating as effectively as possible. So the point of tonight, so some questions to ask yourself going in. What specific issue are you going to speak about? You want, in general, to keep it to one thing, stay focused, know what it is that you're talking about. And in a lot of cases, that might be one issue, it might be one bill. So you want to talk about what action, think what action are you asking for? Is this, when this bill comes to the floor, I would like you to vote for it or against it? Is it, this bill's going to your committee and I would like you to support it? Or there are other things, other kinds of actions that it might be very reasonable to ask a legislator. We're talking advocacy right now, so will you come talk to my Girl Scout troop is probably not the focus for tonight, but is also the kind of thing that our leaders do get asked. So just knowing going in what you're asking them to do so that you can be very clear about that is really very important. If you just call and say, this is so-and-so, such and such thing is bad, that is not actionable as a statement, but there is a bill coming up that I really want you to oppose because I think it would be harmful, is an actionable statement. And then the really simple one, who's your legislator? If you don't know that, there's a lookup tool. We'll be showing you how to do that kind of thing next week even. And it's actually pretty easy to find out. Do they have a record on this issue that you care about already? You could look if this is their first term, you could look at their campaign materials or any coverage they have, just kind of get a sense of whether or not they're likely to agree with you. You're going to want to talk to them whether or not they're likely to agree with you. It's just nice to know going in if it's something they have a history of supporting, especially for someone who's been sitting a while. If they have sponsored a similar bill in the past, it's really good to know that going into the conversation. And what committees they sit on, even if it's not relevant to the issue you're talking about, it makes it clear you've done your homework, that you are interested in government, that you are calling because you've been thoughtful and done a little bit of planning. And then what information and resources should you have on hand before you call? You do not need to be an expert, but you do want to be informed. So you're going to want to think about, for this issue I care about so much, can I answer basic questions about it? Do I know where to go to get those questions answered and sort of plan through that process? So I have a few tips. It is absolutely fine to take notes ahead of time and take notes during. You don't want to sound like you're reading while you talk to somebody, but write down things that are important to you to make sure that you don't forget them. Folks will, I think, will understand that. I've already said you don't need to know everything, but be prepared for some questions. I think really the centerpiece here is you don't have to be an expert. We'll come back to this. You have to be a person who cares about an issue. But if you're prepared to answer questions, it'll be clear that you care enough to have put in the time to figure it out. And if you've met your legislator in the past, you can bring that up. Somebody told me this the other day, a representative told me this the other day, that they forget people because they talk to a lot of people, but they like being reminded. And I don't know if that's true for all of you, and I'll ask actually in a sec. But just in general, it would be pretty reasonable to say, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I talked to you before about whatever, or I met you at a campaign event, or anything along those lines to help foster that human connection is fine. These are people. I would love to ask, Whitney and our representatives, if anybody would like to say anything about anything I've brought up here, the planning piece. We'll go into how to frame an issue in a second, but as far as like when people come into a conversation with you, what's it like if they have taken notes? Do you like that?
Yes, I think that when people come prepared to a conversation, it is always preferable. We often spend a lot of time in meetings. We spend a lot of times in conversation, and sometimes it doesn't feel like we have a whole lot of time to dedicate to a conversation. So if somebody steps forward and says, "These are the issues, these are the facts, and I'd like your help on it," then that's really helpful for me. And yes, also, if you've met me before, much greater chance that you remember me than I remember you. That's partly my mind not working well, but also the fact that I've knocked on thousands of doors and I don't remember everybody. So always great to bring up again.
Thank you. I just accidentally advanced the slide, but that wasn't because I wanted people to stop talking. Representative Warren, does anything here? I know that you are new to your job, but I was wondering if anything there resonated for you.
Well, I largely do concur with Representative Pluker. I think I'm also curious if Whitney has a perspective. For myself, I sometimes think if you're at a place where you feel empowered and you feel like you're here and you're learning or you're sharing your knowledge. My background, although limited, is in activism as well. So I just think you as connecting the issue to the constituents of the community at large, talking about those rooted kind of dynamics that would maybe come up in different ways for the representative. I think that could be compelling. You're probably going to make an argument that is some way connected to your values, but part of those values can be really grassroots, or just connected to people's day-to-day lives. And at least for me, those conversations have been really impactful in such a way. Like I could read about a current event, but it's different when it's comes from someone in the community and they're connecting it to what we can do at the state level. So I don't know if that's
yeah, no, thank you. And we'll get a little bit. I'll hit a couple things in a minute that really connect with that. But I think one of the things you're saying about how it means so much to you when it comes from a member of your community is the reason why we're doing this part of this series. We hear that from legislators, we hear that from people. Our legislators are folks who want to know their constituents, and it matters. Like that's why we're here, is that your voices have more power than you necessarily know. So yeah, Whitney, did you have anything?
Yeah, I love that you said take notes, and I held up my legal pad because I'm taking notes. We're all so busy right now, right? And it's so easy to forget things. And so there's no shame in writing things down and having your things here, I as someone kind of on the other side, right? I've run for office, all of those things, but that's not my role here. My role is to talk to legislators every day and sort of move issues along and whatever that looks like. It can be really daunting, even if that's your paid job. So I just want to name that up front. It can still, it feels really scary. But when you take a step back, I think it's important to remember that legislators are people, they're folks in our communities who have families. We have a citizen legislature. Many of the folks I work with who are legislators, I've seen in community at their jobs, and so I think it's really, really critical to remember, that you're having a conversation with a person. And that can make it a little less scary, right? And so, I want to add too that we are in a really new world here. This is really new for all of us. And especially I'm sure for elected officials who are just newly elected, it's very different to not have a face-to-face conversation, to not see each other as often, and things like that. And so I am sure we'll get into this as we talk, but really connecting issues back to the things you really care about, and why those things really strike you and are personal for you. And Representative Warren's point about being from a district, your elected officials absolutely want to hear from you. Those are the things I get to hear, right? Like, please go talk to folks who are, business owners in my community, or these folks in the community. I really want to hear from them so that, I'm representing my district well. And so I just wanted to really bring that back, because I think that can't be underscored enough. But I'll pause there for now.
It's actually an excellent little segue, because the framing suggestions are next. Like, whenever possible, use a positive frame. Don't just attack your opposition. That's not it. The best way I can think of to say this is that our legislators are people trying to get work done. They're trying to run a state. We are also people trying to get work done. The kind of policies we're talking about are things we're trying to pass or not pass, depending, but ways that we're trying to agree to run our state. It is always more valuable when you're trying to get something done to frame it in terms of what you will accomplish by doing it, rather than pointing fingers at the specific people that you're opposing. It's not that there's never room for that conversation. This is probably not that space. And then the piece that people have already brought up, draw on your personal experience and your convictions. That's the piece that makes this important to you. And if you are sincere when you talk about it, that will come across, and it will make an impact that this is what you care about and why. Don't talk about yourself forever. You want to be concise and clear about what you're here to talk about, but it is absolutely fine to say why an issue is important to you, why you care as much as you do, how long you've worked on this, or how you got involved, whatever it is that really connects. What makes you care enough about this that you're going to call somebody that you've maybe never met and try to have a conversation with somebody that might feel, for some of us, as Whitney mentioned, this can feel scary. And, it's really good to embrace that, but obviously you care enough about it to do it anyway. So draw on that and give people, it's essentially a sincere moment of vulnerability. This is why I care about this. Aim to be concise and clear. As Representative Pluker mentioned, everyone's real busy. And so you don't want to take up more of their time than they want to be able to give you or they're able to give you. So being concise, like saying, sharing that personal thing, but also being concise about what you're asking means you're going to want to practice this a little bit in advance. Just make sure what you're asking is clear. Like, if you did the planning, it probably is, but as you're speaking, don't land in a place where your legislator has to ask you, so what did you want from me? Try to make it that very, very clear. When this comes onto the floor, I would like you to vote for it. It is a perfectly normal thing to say. Or whatever it is. Like, there are a lot of different things that you could be asking, so you're going to want to know what that is, but just be as clear as you can. Some tips. I have call or email. I definitely want to hear from everybody about what works best for them. I request a video chat by email, but that's because I do this constantly for work. And so it is completely, for me, very normal to toss someone an email and say, I'd love to talk to you about a thing. Do you have a time when we might be able to have a Zoom call for 10, 15 minutes or something like that? But a lot of legislators just give out their personal cell phone to the entire world, so you can just call them. So you're going to want to do a little research about that. And I want to hear from folks. You're always going to introduce yourself and say what town you're from, so that they know that you're a constituent. And in some cases, I'm in Portland, so I'm going to say I'm in the West End. I met my senator recently and mentioned, oh yeah, no, I'm in the West End. And he asked which street, and I told him he knows one of my neighbors, and I know that neighbor's dog. And it was a very Maine conversation and a very normal one. And those little connections are really helpful. we've already said it, but just remember, if you're feeling a little bit intimidated, many legislators, they genuinely want relationships with constituents. You don't run for office because you don't care about people. So they care. Plenty of them have probably knocked on your door, and they want to hear, they want to represent you. I can't promise that absolutely everyone in office in Maine is going to be super nice, because that's not how it works, but it is absolutely the norm, that they want to hear from you and hear what you care about. And I'd say be mindful of their time, but be prepared to be friendly, because every time I'm like, I don't want to take any of your time, the next thing I know, they've brought up other things, and we're talking about my neighbor and the dog and what kind of dogs we like, and if we have pets, and whose kid went to school where, and how long I've lived on the street. And those conversations will at least sometimes happen. If folks aren't busy, they want the connection with you as much as you want the connection with them. And if you're prepared to go ahead and be friendly and get to know them a little bit as a human being and build that human connection, I mean, that's good for everybody. It means that the next time you call, they might remember you, or at least you'll remember having that conversation and can refer back. It means a little bit more connection. It's useful and it's pleasant for everybody involved. And I have always say thank you, because I don't think folks will forget, but it is very nice to end a call by thanking someone for their time, hoping they have a nice evening, essentially being polite. This is harder if you're talking to somebody that you adamantly disagree with than it is if you're talking to somebody that you generally agree with, right? So, but we want to do it in both cases. If somebody does generally agree with you, it can still be really good for them to hear that their constituents support them, or to hear details about why. If someone doesn't, then it can be good for them to hear that folks in their district disagree with them and why. It doesn't have to be conflict, but it doesn't always lead to as friendly a conversation if you're calling up somebody and asking them to support something that they adamantly and staunchly do not support. So it's still good to try to be courteous and end on a thank you for your time, even if it doesn't feel as comfortable as you'd like it to. Those relationships are what can, if someone does oppose something that you want them to support, and you're trying to talk to them over time, building that relationship can be part of that process. Them hearing from you can be too. I didn't say don't call every week, but that's probably in here as well. Like, think about people's time and make sure that you have a reason that you're trying to call them. I would love to ask again, if folks have any thoughts about, at least right now, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you if they'd like to talk to you about an issue?
You want to call on somebody, or?
I was just going to let you jump in. I'm sorry.
Okay. I just don't want to go first every time. Next time somebody else can go first. Okay. You have their call or email. I think that's kind of personal to the person. There's a lot of legislators who, even if I want their attention, I've got to call them because they won't respond to my email. And I think that I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's a generational aspect to it, as to what the best way to approach them is. And if I'm going to be in a one-on-one conversation with somebody, it's easier for me to just pick up the phone and talk to them. Though if you want to hear from me quickly in emails, I'm checking email constantly. And if you leave me a phone message at my house, I'm one of the legislators that give you my home phone, then it might be a day or two till I get back to respond to that phone message you left. Yes, always tell me where you're from. It's, I've knocked doors throughout my district, and I want to know, and I just like Evan was saying, like, I might know your neighbors, or at least I might remember knocking on your door or something like that, and making that connection is important to me. And I think also, you often, a constituent might come to me with a particular issue they want me to know about and input, but I also might want to know, well, what's it like living on that street? Or what's it like, oh, you work here, what's it like working there? And it gives me more depth. It can be a two-way. You're asking for something from me, but I also will end up getting something from the conversation that can be really helpful for me. And definitely building relationships. If we've had that conversation, then the next time we come to have a conversation, I'm going to remember that conversation, and we're going to build a relationship that even if we disagree, I know that I can always talk to you about something that I want to know about, or you can always talk to me despite agreeing or disagreeing. Being mindful of time and saying thank you for sure, because there are going to be times when we disagree, but knowing that the heart of the matter is that I'm still doing my best for you, and that we respect each other is super important.
Thank you. Representative Warren, did you have something? And I love that Representative Fluker, you were like, I don't want to go first every time, and I appreciate that.
Well, I just to say for me, I guess I could say like I have my own preferences with certain types. I do prefer like a Zoom type thing for sure, but or email. But no, I am really fortunate to contact people even like through different forms of social media, and I do have my cell phone and get all sorts of messages in all types of forms. I do try to respond to in the medium that I'm being sent a message, and you know, I'll also like see. During campaigning, I friended a whole bunch of people in my district on just my personal Facebook. So I also for a period of time was trying to do outreach to communicate to people, even what my job was to a certain extent, because I wasn't getting the level of engagement I was looking for in my community. So just in all ways trying to meet people where they're at, which is harder with COVID to not be able to do that in person in the same way. But yeah, I don't know if that responds.
No, it does help. I think the piece where figuring out how the specific people you're trying to talk to would like to be contacted, that is definitely a piece that is pretty interesting. I'm curious, I want to hear from you, Whitney, but first I was wondering if folks would raise their hand if you personally know your legislator, at least one of your state legislators. You've met. Yeah. You can raise your hand or use the hand raiser, whatever makes sense. Yeah, it's a fair chunk of us. One of the things we're proudest of in Maine, really, is our very accessible citizen legislature. And that means that for some of us, it really is as easy as like, well, I've met this person before and I'm pretty sure I should drop them an email, or I should call or text their spouse, as may have come up occasionally. Whatever your connection is, like the one that seems most appropriate to that person, that relationship. Yeah, Whitney, did you have anything you wanted to chime in before we break for practice time?
Sure. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of feedback, and so many legislators, as has been mentioned, will just tell you straight up, you know, this is, please don't email me. I have so many emails, just call me. I'd love for you to just call whenever. If I don't get to you, I'll get back to you. And that is different for everyone. And sometimes you do have to ask, and I think that's great. You know, in the chat, we're having a little bit of a conversation about freedom of access. And so I wanted to give folks that information from the source for folks who don't know what freedom of access laws are. Essentially, it means anything sent through governmental channels, like the emails of a legislator, can be requested and seen. And so, you know, when we talk about testifying, for example, we always remind folks, you know, you're going to be recorded and people are going to be able to hear you. Now, is someone going to FOA every email that is sent? Probably not. But, you know, being mindful of that is important. You know, I think one thing that I think about in particular is if, you know, you want to tell a longer story, right? Like you want to really tell a story about an issue, that might be better for something longer form than a phone conversation, because you might not want to keep someone on the phone for an hour. But I think having that personal conversation is really, really important. And if someone says, hey, next time, just shoot me an email, great, you know, just go with the flow. I think that's really an important piece of it. So being flexible.
Thank you, and thank you. I saw that there was stuff coming in the chat, but I couldn't check it at the same time as I was trying to do everything else. So thanks so much for being informative over there for people.
I just wanted to, if I could, if anyone's reading in the chat, maybe it was specific to certain constituents of mine, but there are certain protections. If you, for example, if you communicated something, then there's exceptions that your privacy can be withheld, especially if it has to do with reporting potential criminal activity or something like this. And just to say my understanding, and Representative Fluker, please correct me, you know much better than me, but that it's to keep us accountable and to keep government transparent to you, the people of Maine, not the, there can be exceptions and protections for you if that's a concern.
Thank you for mentioning that. On that, I did put a link, and there is the list of exceptions is on that link. So if folks really want to get into FOA and dig deep, that's the place to do it. It's a pretty good fact sheet from the state of Maine. So.
And it's definitely one of the other things we have been known to brag about in Maine is our transparency in general. So like Representative Warren said, it is intended to make sure that they're doing their job properly, keep them honest, far more than it is intended to have much of, like the constituent piece of that is a smaller piece of all of that. I have an example conversation, but I feel like we've already done it, and it's just full of like, hi, I'm so-and-so. And the idea is really to keep it concise, plan it out ahead of time, maybe even outline what you're going to say and practice it a couple of times so you don't sound too rehearsed, but you do have a good idea of how it's going to go. I'm a big fan of talking to yourself in the mirror until you know what you're going to say and it sounds right. And I do a lot of public speaking, so it's basically part of my process. If I know I'm just having a conversation and I know roughly what I'm going to say, I'm not going to rehearse it to death, but I am going to think, okay, what is my personal connection to the issue? How do I want to frame that? I want to phrase that to make sure that I make it clear how important this is to me. That kind of question ahead of time, and then prepping is not at all a bad idea. I usually say to sort of say things until they feel normal coming out of your mouth, and then forget about them so you don't sound too rehearsed. But it's still a matter of preparing to communicate clearly, essentially. So finding the words in advance can be really helpful compared to like on the spot trying to figure out how to say the thing that you're trying to say. So we're going to practice. I picked a few bills and one that isn't printed yet because it's too good not to, that are doing things. These are real. They are things that some of our legislators are fairly likely to hear at some point. One of them had a hearing today, but none of them are things I thought would, divide this room too intently. So I thought they might make good practice. One of them is to move us into the Atlantic Standard Time Zone, a honeybee special registration plate, recognizing My Sweet Maine as an official song, creating a Maine Lighthouse Trust registration plate, and restoring the former state of Maine flag. I think that's the pine tree one. There's a lot of bills out. Most of them do things with more, I'd say, policy impact than these. But these are also the work of the legislature, and I thought they'd make good practice without just me making up something silly. So I'm about to break you into essentially random groups, but if you want to take a look at these and pick one or two, maybe jot them down, that you think you might enjoy talking about, your group will have 10 minutes to pick an issue, do a little bit of research, choose a position on it, figure out how you want to present that to someone, and nominate one of you to come back and just talk about it a little bit as though you're talking to your legislator. And then you'll get feedback from a couple people who are actually sitting legislators and possibly a couple of others. This is really a chance for you to practice the format before you do it about something you genuinely care about. If any of you do genuinely care about these, you are totally allowed to pick the one that you really do genuinely care about. But in general, I tried to choose things that wouldn't be too divisive. Although I think we could probably fight about time zones really well if we wanted to. I see a couple things in the chat, which I want to take a look at before I open up the breakout room. A couple of folks had to go, that's fine. But I'm going to open the breakout room soon, right now, and then we're going to have 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back. Who wants to be brave and convince us all of your position on something? Yeah, Jane, I see a hand.
Yes.
Go for it.
Hi, my name is Jane Ashworth, and I'm from House District 134. And you and I met at a League of Women Voters Day in Augusta a couple of years ago when we were still able to get there in person before COVID. I'm contacting you today because I am interested in seeking your support for LD 115, which is a bill before the legislature to restore the former flag of Maine. And one of the reasons this is important to me is because the former flag is just so simple. It has as you likely know, it has a tan background with a pine tree and a North Star. It is distinctive from every other flag pretty much in the country. And it is also inclusive because it doesn't have any particular people on it. So it includes all the people of Maine. It also, because it will have the pine tree before us at all times, it will remind us to be careful of our environment and to be good stewards of our trees. Lastly, I would like to suggest that maybe an amendment be introduced that the initial production of these flags be required to be in Maine so that we can generate jobs. So those are my reasons for supporting this bill and asking you to support this bill. And I thank you for your time.
I'm just gonna.
Very good.
Do we have any
Jane?
I thought that was fabulous. Any feedback?
Were you at the hearing today?
No.
Seriously, like I was at the hearing and that was, I mean, that was spot on. And there was a discussion about bringing jobs to Maine because I believe Scarborough would have the factory, or they're hoping to do that. So that was fantastic.
Thank
well
you.
done.
I like how you brought up your connection to the legislator, you know, how you'd met them before so they could, because they're interested in establishing relationships, it helps them, you know, make that connection right away.
You hit the Mainer pride. Too,
Marna has her hand raised. No, okay.
No, those are clapping hands.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody else have anything? I was genuinely quite blown away. Anybody else?
I just want to say, I love that you brought in different views. Maybe a different thing may have been what you know, the legislator would pick up on, and it seemed like you felt, you know, these were organic things and you could have gone in any direction further on them. So I appreciated the different kind of arguments.
I'm thankful for the group that gave me a lot of good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Would anybody like to follow that with make an attempt to report out for your group? I see a hand from someone whose display name is Dan. I don't know.
That's my husband's name. I have stepped in for him. I'm Claudia, she, her, hers.
Okay. Hi, Claudia.
Hi. So I am speaking to my legislator, Chris Babbage. Hi, Chris. I'm Claudia Sayre from Kennebunk. And I've enjoyed listening to you speak to us at our Democratic Municipal Committee in town. I am calling today in support of LD 115, restoring the former state of Maine flag. My husband and I have the old state of Maine flag out in front of our house where we fly it every day. As soon as we learned that it was available, we went out and purchased it, and we absolutely love it. It's a much simpler design, which makes it graphically much more memorable. And it's also more open to interpretation. People seeing the pine tree might think about, you know, a resource which has been very important to Maine's history. They might also think about the Maine woods and you know, how much Mainers love the environment and getting out in it, and the importance of being good stewards of our environment. The symbolic iconography is really recognizable as Maine. It's very clear, very different from any other state. It is definitely more inclusive. It's not just two men who belong to certain industries on the flag. There's, you know, because there are no people, it can represent everybody, including the Native Americans who first lived here, who pride themselves on being good stewards of the environment. Also, it is a very popular flag. There are lots of people, lots of Mainers like me who love it. And I think there may be more versions of the old flag that people have out flying in front of their houses than the current one. So for all of these reasons, I hope that you will come out in support of this bill. Thank you.
All right. Did everyone pick the flag? I'm going to crack up if everyone. I thought somebody would try to convince us we ought to move time zones.
It's something we know something about, so it was it was easier.
I advocate for time zone change.
You mean generally or tonight?
Tonight.
Okay. We are, I want to be mindful of time. It is 7 o'clock.
Yeah, we're out of time, but you know,
folks
it makes so much sense to change our time zones.
If anyone else wants to stick around, I can stick around for a few more minutes and I'll still listen to you because you sat there and did work and I want to make sure you get a chance to say it and get some feedback. But I also want everybody to be released to be free because it's 7 p.m. and you've done good work tonight. Thanks, folks.